Ultima prezentare va fi susținută de Corneliu Ghica, în care ne va vorbi despre ordonarea chimică în perovskiți dubli folosind microscopia atomică de înaltă rezoluție.
Mulțumesc frumos. I don't know, are there any in the online, are there any foreigners? Okay, one. Okay. So I guess I should speak in English. So I'll be talking about revealing chemical ordering in barium lanthanide cobaltites, double perovskites, by atomic resolution analytical TEM. This is the outline. I will just show you that I will speak about two compounds based on lanthanum and praseodymium. And I will start by saying that these results have been obtained in the frame of a large collaborative project involving different partners from several countries in the frame of the SAED consortium. So I will start from a well-known fact today that our continuously expanding human species needs more and more energy for functioning, and the problem is that not always the technologies that we are using are completely eco-friendly, and I'll give here just the example of the fossil fuel power plants, which are one of the greatest air pollutants with a substantial contribution to global warming. And we can add to this the fact that in order to work, they use fossil fuel which is in limited quantities, and adding to that some economical strategies may lead to significant electricity price increase that we are living these days. It's clear that we need to find and to search and find new materials and be able to produce clean energy, and one of the solutions could be the use of fuel cells, which are non-polluting, which are already quite efficient with an efficiency of 40 to 60%, but which still need to be developed by searching and using new materials with higher performances. So barium lanthanide cobaltites are double perovskites which are studied for applications in electrochemical and electrocatalytic devices. I mentioned just a few properties that recommend them for the use in electrochemical cells. They have high electronic conductivity, plus a high oxygen mobility at temperatures over 300 degrees Celsius under oxidizing conditions, so which recommends them for the use as mixed ionic and electronic conductors for electrode materials in high temperature electrochemical cells. There are three main polymorphs for barium lanthanide cobaltite. First of them is the cubic structure, and I represent it here. You can see that the oxygen ions are represented in red, cobalt is in blue, inside here. We have barium, and we have a lanthanide ion, which can be maybe lanthanum, the whole series of lanthanide elements. So in the case of a disordered structure where the lanthanide position can be equally occupied by barium or lanthanide ion, we have a cubical structure. In case that when we start to order the barium and lanthanide ions in well-defined atomic positions, we end with a new structure having the same lattice parameter as the cubic one on two directions, and the double lattice parameter along the third direction, the C direction. So this would be the tetragonal double perovskite. There is a third structure, the orthorhombic, in which we have an additional ordering. So we keep the same ordering along the C-axis, but also along the B-axis we may have in the AB plane, we may have some ordering of vacancies on the oxygen positions, as it is known that this structure can sustain a large oxygen non-stoichiometry. So as I told you, this is part of a collaborative research project. The samples have been produced in Poland at the Gdańsk University. They have produced several samples where they used for lanthanide these whole series of ions, and they performed also preliminary XRT characterization. Our mission by HRTEM at NIMP was to perform an in-depth microstructural characterization of the compounds to evidence possible effect of lanthanide ion size and oxygen non-stoichiometry on hydration for developing mixed proton and electron conducting ceramics. So the studies have been performed on the CS corrected microscope, the ARM 200F, which is provided with an EEL spectrometer and a Gatan Quantum EEL Spectrometer, and we also had to use some programs for HRTM image simulation. So after the XRD refinement performed by our colleagues in Poland, they determined that the as prepared samples of barium. So I will give you two examples: the barium lanthanum cobaltite, and I will start with this, and the next one will be barium praseodymium cobaltite. So for this sample, they determined that the as prepared samples have a cubic structure, while after annealing at 1000 degrees Celsius in argon, the sample contains two phases, about 35% tetragonal phase and 64% orthorhombic phase. This is a typical grain extracted from this sample. Well, we have to work with typical grains because you cannot investigate all of them, of course. And this is the EEL spectrum obtained on this grain, telling us that we have a atomic ratio between barium, lanthanum, and cobalt of 1.2 to 1 to 1.7, which is pretty close to the nominal composition, which should have been 1 to 1 to 2. This is how an electron diffraction pattern looks. The electron diffraction generated from this grain looks like. The grain has been tilted in order to obtain a zone axis orientation, and here we are oriented along a pseudo-cubical zone axis. What can we see in this diffractogram? We have strong spots and faint or weak spots. These strong spots correspond to distances. For example, here we have 0.39, so 3.9 angstrom, which is nothing else but the interplanar distance, which is characteristic to the simple perovskite. But in halfway between the transmitted spot and the 0.39 nanometer spot, we have a weak spot, which indicates a doubling of the lattice parameter along this direction. If we look on the perpendicular direction, we also notice that we have weak spots, suggesting also that we have a doubling of the lattice parameter along the other direction. So comparing with the structural models that we saw on the previous slide, we could conclude that we have an orthorhombic structure and the problem is closed. Well, is it? So in order to make a more careful analysis, we performed HRTEM investigations on the thinnest part of this grain. And I present you here, it's a small magnification HRTEM image. I just put it as it was recorded. But inside these areas, we have different structures revealed by the corresponding fast Fourier transformed diagrams that we have here underneath. So this diagram corresponding to area 1 shows strong spots as like the diffraction pattern, and weak spot only along a single direction. We don't see any additional weak spot on the other direction. So we can conclude that this area could actually have a tetragonal structure. While in the other area, area 2, we can notice that we have these weak spots along the two perpendicular directions. So this is a good candidate for an orthorhombic structure. Here we have the enlarged image, the enlarged area 2, where we cannot see that just by simply visually inspecting the image, that we cannot really see this lattice parameter doubling along one or the other direction. But if we take an intensity line profile along the two directions, 1 and 2, we get these intensity oscillations separated by 7.8 angstrom, which confirms the lattice parameter doubling along the direction 1, but also along direction 2. Okay, so we can notice this lattice parameter doubling, but what does it mean in fact? What is the reason that we have this lattice parameter doubling? So in order to get even more information, we had to change the working mode, and we worked in STEM, adding analytical investigations by EELS, and also combining the two in order to get local compositional maps. So what we have here is a STEM annular dark field image, where we already start to observe some doubling, lattice parameter doubling along this direction, not very much along this direction, but we performed what is called Eel Spectrum Imaging. So in this area marked with green rectangle, we accumulated in each pixel two kinds of simultaneous information, image information and composition information, using the Eel spectrometer. What you see here below is it's an Eel spectrum extracted from this scanned area, and we can notice here that we have the expected elements. We have the oxygen here, we have the cobalt L32 edge here, the barium M54 edge, and the lanthanum M54 edge here. From this data package, we could extract local composition, and I show it here on the right. And what we have here, we have a local composition for each detected element, barium, cobalt, lanthanum, at a pretty high resolution. We are at atomic resolution here, and we can compare the spatial distribution of these elements, and we can notice that the barium and the lanthanum are disposed on interleaving planes, which is in perfect agreement with the lattice parameter doubling along the c-axis. So this should be the c-axis, as we noticed in selected area diffraction or HRTEM images. But this time we have a chemical confirmation about the nature of this lattice parameter doubling. And this is the structure, the structural model, including showing the ordering along the z-axis. But this is not all, because if we take a line profile along a perpendicular direction, we also have, we notice an intensity oscillation, which has a period of 7.8 angstrom. So which could be the cause is not, we could not entirely explain, but one additional, we expect that we may have an additional ordering of barium and lanthanum ions along the b-axis on shared atomic positions. And if we look careful here, it's not a free affirmation, because if we look careful here, we can see that lanthanum has a non-vanishing signal here in between the main rows, which tells us that indeed barium and lanthanum may share some atomic positions, and these can be ordered along the b-axis, which would explain this lattice parameter doubling along the b-axis. I will go to the next example, which is on barium praseodymium copper cobaltite, not cobaltite. This is another example of a grain with on which we measured the chemical composition by EDS. We obtained values of atomic ratios barium to praseodymium to cobalt of about 0.9 to 1 to 1.8, pretty close to the nominal value. And what we see here is that this grain doesn't show a uniform contrast, but it shows stripes, bright and dark stripes, which normally correspond to structural domains. So we wanted to analyze these structural domains. We started by electron diffraction, selected area electron diffraction. And we have here two diffraction patterns corresponding to area A and area B. In both diffraction patterns, we notice that we have strong spots and weak spots. Strong spots corresponding to the lattice parameter of a single perovskite, and weak spots indicating the doubling of the lattice parameter along certain directions, along this direction and along this direction for area B. So while indexing, now we are not in a pseudo-cubic orientation. We have here different orientations, -2, 1, 0 and 0, -1, 1. These diffraction patterns have been indexed according to the orthorhombic structure, having these lattice parameters, so doubled lattice parameters along B and C. Well, the problem is that we started to, by analyzing with carefully the diffraction pattern, beside the weak spots that I indicated, we also see even fainter spots along the perpendicular directions. And we asked what could it be? So is it another ordering process, or what could it be? In fact, it's not that complicated. They are nothing else but the trace of diffraction spots from a neighboring area, because the selecting aperture that we used was not small enough to select only one single domain, but we also had contributions for a neighboring domain, which is in a different orientation. So this faint spot that we see here is nothing else but a trace of this 011 spot from the B area, and vice versa. Well, next question, what is the reason for the lattice parameter doubling? Again, like in the previous example. So this is a high resolution image in an area containing two domains at the interface between the two domains A and B, and these are the enlarged images of A and B. We can see that we have a lattice parameter doubling along this direction in this frame and along this direction in the B area. Here, these are the line profiles along the two indicated directions, showing that we have indeed 7.5 nanometers along A, which is the double of a perovskite cell, and here we measure 5.4 angstrom. But also we notice a double lattice parameter, which we try to explain by performing this time HRTEM image simulation. So we performed image simulation for the two orientations, -210 and 0-11, which we also had in the electron diffraction. What you see here is a matrix of simulated images. We used the Mac Tempest software of this structure, of the orthorhombic structure of BPCO along -210 direction for different values of the sample thickness and objective lens defocus. So we have the thickness growing this way and the under focus varying in this direction. Now, if we compare the experimental image with the simulated image, I would say that this simulated image obtained for 40 nanometers of thickness and -10 nanometers of defocus would correspond the best, let's say, to the experimental image. And overlapping the structural model on the simulated image, we can see that these intensity variations correspond to the atomic position for praseodymium and barium. What I would like to stress here is that we needed this kind of simulation because this time we are in HRTEM, not in STEM, and here all the contrast variations cannot be immediately interpreted as as heavy or light element, but you need image simulation to come to a correct conclusion. So, as a result of this simulation, we would say that in the observed intensity modulations in the experimental images are associated, which are associated to the lattice parameter doubling along 001, correspond indeed to the barium praseodymium cationic ordering. What about the other zone axis, O-11? Again, a series of simulated images, and I extracted here the image simulated for a thickness of 50 nanometers and a defocus of -20 nanometers. And these images have been obtained for a structure where we included also some oxygen vacancies and ordered along in the AB plan along the B direction. And if we now overlap the structural model on the simulated image, we indeed see that we have these intensity variations on positions occupied by oxygen atoms, where the intensity variation is due to the vacancy ordering along the B direction. So the simulation conclusion is that the lattice parameter doubling observed along the 011 direction is associated to the oxygen positions, pointing to a process of oxygen vacancy ordering. So I will come to the conclusions and said that we investigated, all the investigated double perovskites contain two crystallographic phases with major orthorhombic and minor tetragonal structure, or single phase orthorhombic in the case of these elements, but I could not show all the results here. The alternating barium and lanthanide layers were directly observed, confirmed and observed by TEM via EELS elemental mapping, And also the orthorhombic ordering of the oxygen sublattice vacancies were observed by HRTEM imaging and explained by image simulation in agreement with the synchrotron radiation, powder X-ray diffraction, and powder nuclear diffraction refinements. Just the acknowledgement of the supporting project. I would like to invite you to open this page and take advantage of the open access in this network of research institutes. And with this, I will thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Cornel, for the presentation. Any questions? No? So for those who are not familiar, huh? Okay. Mishu. Wait.
It's an oxygen vacancy ordering. And in order to be only along the A axis or B axis, from the structure you show us, so this vacancy happens only in the lower part of the unit cell. I think so. This actually produces, let's say, selectivity. It's along A or B. Oh, it's here. No, in this picture, it's right in the middle. Actually, the vacancy, right? Okay.
This is the minus 210 orientation,
Okay.
And here we could assign this intensity variation along the 001 direction to the ordering of praseodymium and barium. And we didn't notice any other intensity variation on a perpendicular direction. So this would perfectly explain the lattice parameter doubling. The problem was more delicate on the other zone axis, where we analyzed, of course, along here on the second, where using the same structural model, we could not explain this by any cation ordering. So we had to find another explanation. That's why we looked at the oxygen. And yes, of course, we were somehow inspired by the refinements from XRD.
But it depends where you choose the position of the oxygen vacancy, right?
The position of the oxygen?
Yes, yes. It depends on that one, whether...
Yes, indeed. So we tried to model, so to create a model to simulate as well as possible the experimental image, and we came.
It's slightly asymmetric, and
this
probably along the B axis. So that this actually is a doubling on the B axis, not on the A axis. It's depending where you choose the oxygen position.
Yes. So this is the structural model that we used, and I must say that it's not easy to see. So this is the structural model. Here we are in a different orientation with respect to this one, but I used it in order to show the oxygen ordering. So these are planes, this one and this one, containing oxygen vacancies. Here I didn't put any oxygen vacancy. And now I rotated the structural model along the 0, -1, 1 orientation, and I indicate by these arrows which are the plans that contain oxygen vacancies. And so we have a lattice parameter doubling from this, given by the fact that here we have oxygen vacancies, here we don't. Here we have, here we don't. And we have a lattice doubling a lot along 0, 1, 1. That's how I...
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? If not, we thank you, Cornel, for his presentation. We let him prepare the final remarks.